Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our service of Remembrance. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Ian Dewar. I'm the chaplain for the Morecambe Bay Trust. Normally, we have about 4 remembrance services a year in our trust. There's 2 held in the Lancaster area and 2 in the Barrow-in-Furness area. This year, because of the pandemic, we've been unable to do that. And this is really sad because gathering together in private space to remember loved ones is as old as humanity itself. In order to meet this challenge, the chaplaincy team, along with other teams in the Trust, have got together to put together a service for us to come together online to mark out our own grief and our own bereavement. The structure of this service is very simple. It is a collection of prayers, interviews and hymns and readings and thoughts. In order to enable you to join as much as possible with this, wherever appropriate, words will appear on screen. So if you wish to sing with the hymns, you're very welcome to do so. And if you wish to join in with the prayers, you'll be welcome to do so when we get there. The service, whilst clearly influenced by the pandemic, it has to be said, is not just about the pandemic. Many of you will have lost loved ones to other diseases over the past few months or since the beginning of the year. And you may have been restricted. You're restricted at funerals, the numbers can attend. You're restricted about relatives visiting. Sometimes very early on in the pandemic, restricted in being able to see your loved one. And so everyone is welcome to this service. We're going to begin our service first with just a moment's silence in which you can gather your thoughts and your hearts and minds and then proceed through. Thank you. Our first piece of music for this evening has very powerful resonance, both for us in the middle of the pandemic and the challenge it represents, and for our reason. The hymn Amazing Grace was written by John Newton, who was a former slave trader, and his conversion to Christianity in support of William Wilberforce in the abolition of slavery was a keynote in the history of this country. Our own region has strong connections. Lancaster, much to the darkness of its past, it was once the 4th largest slavery port in the country, and up the coast in Cumbria at Whitehaven there was slavery involvement there as well. Yet in the midst of all that, the hymn is about darkness being overcome by light. It's about cruel change coming out of cruelty, and it's about personal and community hope. hospitals. Very powerful, moving song. But amongst all the challenges that you've seen on TV about the pandemic, the challenge it's brought to the NHS, all the difficulties, what is it really like to be a nurse in those circumstances? What indeed is it like to be a nurse now? In order to gain a greater insight into this, we talked to Sarah Grimshaw, who's clinical lead on Ward 23 at the Royal Lancaster Infirmary, a ward that has a high level of elderly and dementia patients.
When it first sort of came in the news, I'll admit that I was quite sceptical. I was a bit blasé, I think, at first. I thought, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. It's just going to, you know, with all the other flus that we've sort of had and the threats of pandemics before. I didn't really think about it very much, sort of heard it in the background on the news. And then I started hearing more and more that patients were coming into hospital, and I then started to panic quite badly, actually. At first I was still trying to remain really calm because it wasn't really on our ward at the time, but I then started panicking a little bit and thinking this is getting quite serious now. And then we had the age-old question of someone who's got experience in intensive care or acute medical experience, and I spent a lot of time at home thinking this is my duty now. I need to kind of hold my hand up, and no matter how frightened I am, I've got to look after these patients and volunteer. So I made the very difficult decision to redeploy myself, really. And that was really, really tough. And my husband and my family were really worried about my own health. I was worried about their health, but I did what I had to do. It's my job.
You got redeployed, but at the same time there were all sorts of issues on Ward 23 going as well. You must have been aware of. Talk us through those. So
at the time we were starting to, we actually did get some COVID positive patients in the hospital. We had a patient that we tested and actually come back as positive, and we don't know how that sort of that transmission was happening. And then obviously we started seeing more and more patients that were sort of in the bay with this patient, then started contacting it themselves. As much as we'd isolated them as quickly as possible, it started then to spread quite quickly, and patients became really, really sick very quickly. One shift in particular, I spent my time pretty much just battling and fighting, trying to keep the patients alive, which was really, really hard. And being frightened yourself, you're tired really, because you don't want to, it sounds awful, you don't want to be going in the room, but you know you have to. Even with all the PPE that we had, it was really, really frightening. And all I kept thinking was, I need to do my job, but I don't want to be in this room anymore because I don't know what it's going to do to me. Am I going to catch it? It was really, really hard.
We'll be hearing more from Sarah later on in the service. What we want to do now is try and give you a feel for a wider perspective of how this has had an impact on us. You make many plans as a Chief Executive Officer as to what you'd like to do with the Trust, but the best laid plans of mice and men often get put to the test. And we want to know how Aaron Cummins, our Chief Executive, have coped with that in light of all recent events. And so we put that question to him.
I think just the work that we've done as an organisation the last 7 or 8 months, I'm really proud of. I think we've done the best we can to keep each other safe and our community safe. But we just don't know what this winter's going to look like. You know, we've got colleagues now who are testing positive and having to isolate. We've got members of our community who've had the disease and are recovering at home. We've got flu, and we don't know what the weather's going to be like. So just a concern now about what's coming and, you know, making sure we're as prepared as we can be for it. The leadership challenge has been, you know, a real eye-opener for me around, you know, what you find out about yourself, your team, you know, the teams that we've got working in the organisation. And like I said before, just really proud of everyone's response. From my perspective, these are the challenges that you get given as a chief executive, whether it's something like a pandemic or an opportunity to take advantage of, like, you know, the estates builds we're looking at. All it, for me, is about being really clear on what we're expected to achieve, looking after folk to get it done as best we can, giving them the right resources and encouragement to deliver. It's nothing more complicated than that. and yet I think I'm drastically oversimplifying, because there are days when it's a real challenge, but keep it simple is a leadership motto of mine. It's been a really difficult period, really difficult. I think from my perspective, it's very difficult not to know someone, either personally or in work, that suffered some kind of loss over this last 7 or 8 months. We've all found it difficult. I can speak personally. I lost my granddad over this period. We've had to grieve and remember people, our families, our friends who we've lost in a different way. And my advice to people is, so far as I'm able to give advice, is go with it. Reach out, be close to your friends and family. Make sure that it doesn't overwhelm you. Talk to people if it starts to feel a little bit like that. But I think when we're faced with a really difficult set of circumstances where we would have wanted to have done something in a different way and we can't, I think we just need to do the best we can with what we've got, keep each other supported, reach out and talk to each other. But don't forget, this isn't me saying don't remember and don't grieve, but I do believe that we need to do things a little differently. But remembrance is really powerful, particularly at this time of year. I do think it can spur us on to do different things, to be better, and to make sure that people's legacy or their memories, they're not lost. So take that opportunity when you can.
Time now for another piece of music. This time it's a piece specially written for our occasions and the challenges we faced. This is written by David Webster, a paramedic at the Trust and a trainer in respiratory. And he's joined playing on his guitar, he's joined in this piece whilst he plays the guitar by Lucy Satterthwaite, who is the vocalist, singing together My Heart is Blue.
There was always a chance that this day would come. The shadow of fear facing everyone. But rainbows appeared and our hearts turned blue. We found the courage to care for you. We found the courage to care for you. My heart is blue without you. My heart is blue. We lost you. My heart is blue. We love you. My heart is blue. Always be true. You slipped away, and nothing could alter that fateful day. Despite our love and care for you, you're gone and our hearts have turned blue. Oh, you're gone and our hearts have turned blue. My heart is blue without you. My heart is blue. We lost you. My heart is blue. We love you. My heart is blue. Always be true. They say a blue heart will never restart. And even though we have been torn apart, together we're strong. We will carry on, bringing hope, love and care still to everyone. Bringing hope, love and care still to everyone. A blue-colored ocean made from all our tears.
Our hearts are blue. It's amazing, isn't it, how one word and one colour can carry so much meaning for us. We're going to have a reading now, which will be read by Lindsay Anderson, who's lead of our bereavement team at the Trust. And it's written from a long piece, 2,500 years ago, that has all that meaning and that reflection in it.
For everything there is a season. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the sons of men to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's mind, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end.
Lindsay, thank you. I just want to spend, if I may, a few moments reflecting on those words and what they might mean to us and how we might use them to give ourselves some strength and some courage for the days ahead. The words, as I mentioned, are probably about 2,500 years old. Some of them may be a wee bit older. They're what's called wisdom literature. And I've read them a number of times over the years and found them very kind of moving and very true. They're almost self-evident truth in a sense, aren't they? Because, yeah, there is a time to be born and a time to die because you're born and you die. There is a time when you want to kind of make peace and reconciliation, and times you've got to stand up for things and fight for them. There is a time when change needs to come and we need to build something new. And all that's there and very profound. But over the years, as I've thought and reflected on this passage even more, I've begun to realise there's something I was missing at the beginning that is slowly kind of becoming more meaningful for me. If we read the passage straight off, it's a statement. It's a lovely balanced statement of truth and opposites. But actually, I've also begun to realise it's a question. Because as you read that passage, what comes through is it's saying to me, Ian, what is it time for in your life? What season of life are you in? We're used to the idea of seasons because we think of summer and winter, spring, autumn. We know that right now at this point in time, for us, it's a time of sadness, it's a time of reflection, it's a time of remembrance as we think of our loved ones. We also know, entering the lockdown on Thursday, that it's a time of challenge. So we know all those things. Our very language has that, doesn't it? You know, it's time for a change, or what time is it? Or the time wasn't quite right for me to do that. So those words are kind of there. But I think they resonate at an even deeper level. So let me tell you about something else. You may know this yourselves. There's a book that's written called Man's Search for Meaning by a guy called Viktor Frankl. And if you've read it, you'll be aware of what he learned and discovered and what he put into that book. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, a psychiatrist. He was an Austrian. He was also Jewish at the time of Hitler's rise to power. As a consequence of that, he ended up in one of the concentration camps, or 2 or 3 concentration camps, eventually in Auschwitz. Viktor Frankl discovered 2 profound truths in his time in those camps. The first one was this. He realised that no matter what they took from him, and they took everything, they took his wife, they took his parents, they took his job, they took his home, they took his career, they took his status, they took his possessions, everything. It dawned on him one day that the one thing they could not take from him was his freedom to choose his own attitude to his own circumstances. He describes this very powerful in the book, Man's Search for Meaning, when he talks about walking home one winter's evening from having been working, because they sent the camp internment people out to work. That was their idea. It was slave labour in effect. And he's coming home and he saw sunset and realised it was still beautiful. In the midst of hell, he could see beauty. The second great truth he realised was that actually we often think of what are we going to do in life? How are we going to make a success of life? How are we going to build a career? What's going to happen to us? Well, what's the meaning or purpose of life? But he said he really changed, as did other members of the camp, when they flipped that on its head and said, hold on a minute, the real question is not what can I get out of life, but what is life asking of me now? What can I do? Where can I find hope and strength? And this is what they used to talk about to other prisoners who were struggling. You know, what does life expect of you at this moment in time? For him, it was a decision that he was going to survive. Not only would he survive, but he'd write a book, and he would imagine himself writing books and lecturing and telling people all about his experiences, how bad it was and how you can avoid it. And of course he did that. He did so. How does that relate to us? We are in bereavement, we're in pain, we are sad. But what is life asking of us at this moment in time? It is asking at one level that we do the right thing. We grieve the loss of a loved one. It is asking that we do the right thing and that we remember a loved one. We have this moment of remembrance. But it might be asking something more of us. It might be asking us to use our experience of loss or sadness and pain to make a difference in the world. Before becoming a chaplain at the Trust, I spent 8.5 years as a hospice chaplain, and it was a privileged role. I had lots of conversations with people who had a terminal diagnosis. Some of that was a couple of months. Some people were known for 18 months that they were going to die, and they became part of the hospice community, and we had all sorts of conversations. And I realised lots of truths in that time, and lots of things that were a gift to me from them. One of the things I learned was that one of the most important things for people who are dying is to know that the things that they love and care for will have life afterwards. This used to come across in a very amusing way. Sometimes you call to see a patient to have a chat to them, and they may be moving towards the end of life, and they'd be a wee bit agitated, and you couldn't quite get to the bottom of it. And then you discover that they lived by themselves, they hadn't got any relatives close by, so they knew they were dying, we talked about it, what was it? And it suddenly dawned on them, the question came out, but when I die, who's going to look after my dog? They wanted what they loved to go on. And so I sometimes think that the greatest testimony, the greatest thing that life asks of us when someone we love dies, is to go on living and to live well, to live purposefully. And what would that mean for you? Maybe you've got a great book to write. Maybe you just need to contact somebody you've lost touch with over the years. Maybe you just need to say hello to your neighbour. It's even more difficult at the moment because of the pandemic, and I appreciate that, but in a strange way, maybe that's why life is asking us bigger questions even now. How can we meet this challenge? It's not going to go away overnight, that's for sure. But what difference could you and I make to those around us if we take the remembrance of the loved one and in honour of them, make a difference for good in this world? Thank you. We're going to move now to our prayers and our act of remembrance. These are going to be led by Debbie Wild, who's our chaplain at Furness General Hospital. Unfortunately, Debbie can't be here with us tonight because she's self-isolating, so one more impact of the pandemic upon us. During our prayers, you'll be able to see candles lit on screen that you've asked for in memory of your loved ones, and they'll be playing, and you'll be able to look at those as Debbie leads the prayers. There is a minute silence as part of this package, and we've done that for two reasons. One is it's good to be silent and reflect, but we recognise too that people may not always want to join in with the prayers, and we want to make space for you as well to have reflections for your loved ones and hold them in your heart. The candles we set out in a particular way that you'll see on the screen are very much in the shape of a Celtic cross. There are many Celtic and Anglo-Saxon crosses in this area. It's a very ancient area for things such as that. And one of the most famous Celtic saints was Saint Cuthbert, who was from Lindisfarne. His body was rescued by his followers from Viking invaders in Lindisfarne, and they took it on a huge journey around the north until they could finally get a resting place for him, which was Durham. And I've got to read this bit because there's a list here. But his body was cared for by his followers, and John de Wessington, a prior of Durham in the early 15th century, and I'm told as a gifted scholar, compiled an itinerary of the places he believed he'd been visited by them. His research was based on the fact that wherever they stopped, there seemed to be a church dedicated to St Cuthbert. He found 6 in Northumberland, 1 in Westmoreland, 4 in Cumberland, 11 in Lancashire, 3 in Yorkshire, so they obviously got a wee bit lost there, didn't they? But I come from Lancashire, so I would think that. 5 in Richmond, 7 in Cleveland, 4 in Durham. We stand in a long tradition in this part of the world of commemorating our loved ones.
We recognise this evening that whilst many of us have been able to attend a funeral for a loved one or a friend, some of us might not have been able to. For that reason, our prayers this evening are based on those that might normally have been heard at a funeral. The prayers are in 4 parts. Part 1 is a prayer of thanksgiving for the life of the departed. Part 2 is a prayer for God to remember those that we commend to him. Part 3 is a prayer for strength in grief. Part 4 is a prayer for unfinished business. Whenever someone dies, there is always the possibility for unfinished business. We can live complicated lives. This prayer is a chance for you, in the quietness of your own hearts, to tell the person you love them, perhaps forgive them if there was any cause of hurt, or apologise for any hurt caused. Each part will finish in the words, "Lord, in your mercy," and the response, if you wish to join in, is, "Hear our prayer." These words will appear on your screen. There will then be a minute's silence. At the end of that, I will say the Lord's Prayer, and you're very welcome to join in. So let us pray. God of mercy and Lord of life, you have made us in your image to reflect your light and truth. We give thanks for those we remember this evening, for the grace and mercy they received from you, for all that was good in their life, for the memories that we treasure today. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. You promised eternal life to those who believe. Remember for good your servant, as we remember them. Bring all who rest in Christ into the fullness of your kingdom, where sins have been forgiven and death is no more. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Your mighty power brings joy out of grief and life out of death. Look in mercy on all those who mourn. Give them patient faith in times of darkness. Strengthen them with the knowledge of your love. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. You are tender towards your children, and your mercy is over all your works. Heal the memories of hurt and failure. Give us the wisdom and grace to use aright the time that is left to us here on earth, to turn to Christ and to follow in his steps in the way that leads to everlasting life. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. As Christ taught us, so we pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen.
Many colleagues from different faith traditions have played their part at the Trust in dealing with the pandemic and its consequences, and we have a significant number of Muslim colleagues on our staff. We're going to hear now from Mohammed Nassim, our clinical lead and consultant in urology, who's going to read for us two prayers from the Islamic tradition. They will be read first of all in Arabic and then translated into English.
In the name of Allah, the merciful, the benevolent, and praise be to his Prophet, and salutations. Allahumma aghfir lahu warhamhu wa afihi wa'fu anhu wa akrim nuzulahu wa wassi mudkhalahu wa aghsilhu bil ma'i wat talaji wal barad wa nakkih min al khataya kama naqqaytu as-thawb al abjuz min ad-danas wa abdilhu dara khayra min darihi wa ahlan khayra من أهله وزوج خير من زوجه وأدخله الجنة وعزه من عذاب القبر وعذاب النار. O Allah, forgive them and have mercy on them, and give them strength and pardon them. Be generous to them, and cause their entrance to be white, and wash them with water and snow and hail. Cleanse them of their transgressions, as white cloth is cleaned of stains. Give them an abode better than their home, and a family better than their family, and a wife better than their wife. Take them into paradise and protect them from the punishment of grave and from the punishment of hellfire. Allahumma aghfir li hayyitina wa mayyitina wa shahidina وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا الله ومن أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفه على الإيمان اللهم لا تحرمنا أجره ولا تذلنا بعده. O Allah, forgive our living and our dead, those who are with us and those who are absent, our young and our old, our menfolk and our womenfolk. O Allah, whomever you give life from among us, give him life in Islam, and whomever you take away from us, take him away in faith. O Allah, do not forbid us their reward, and do not send us astray after them. May Allah accept their efforts, their shahada, and give them peace and blessings in the life hereafter, and forbearance to the families. Jazakallah.
Going to hear again from Sarah Grimshaw now. In her first piece, she talked about the challenges that she met and how she dealt with those. In the second part, she's going to speak about her thoughts for the future. One of the things that struck me was that alongside the emphasis on COVID, we still have other patients coming in, moving towards end of life, and
Absolutely.
How did that affect you? Were you thinking of those? Were you conscious of those?
Yeah.
How did that
I
work?
was really worried about, obviously, like you say, as well as having dementia, they're really frail. They have a lot of comorbidities, a lot of, problems that, like COPD or heart failure. They are very frail anyway. And those patients were still sort of coming in, and I was really, really genuinely concerned about what was going to happen to them. And you were almost like waiting for the inevitable, really. And you were wondering how you were going to manage that, and trying to keep everyone else safe, as well as managing the patients who were really sick. You're trying to manage the ward and trying to keep your staff safe and your patients safe.
We're talking now about this second wave we're going into and all the various tiers and so forth. How do you personally and as a clinical lead feel about the future, what might be around the corner?
I'm really uncertain, but I'm a positive person anyway. So I do think we are going to get a hold of this and get a grip of it. And I just can't really see an end to it at the moment. But I do think it will come. It's just when that's going to be. I can't see it being in the near future. I don't know. I don't know what the future's going to hold. I really don't.
So what piece of advice would you give me to live with this now then?
I just think you need to be sensible. Wash your hands. Wear your mask when you're going out, like the government are telling you to, because it does offer protection. I think people need to be mindful of the effect of what, you know, it might not affect someone else, but it might, you know, might not affect you, but it might affect somebody else. And people need to be mindful of that and not be selfish. Wear the PPE that we're asking you to do. Wash your hands, and just stay at home as much as you can. And that's just my best advice that I can give to anybody.
We come now to our final hymn, led, as was our first hymn, by David, Lucy, by Joe, Martha and Debbie. After the hymn, there will be a Celtic blessing, and our service will then draw to a close with the candle again for you to reflect on and to have some moments for your own thoughts there. But now we end with a hymn which has been sung by many over the years, Abide With Me.
Lord, with
Come now to our blessing at the end of our service. It wouldn't quite be a church service without notices, would it? So I will give you a couple. When the service comes to an end and the crates run up, afterwards we're going to leave the camera running and it'll be on the candle in the wreath, so you can sit there with your own thoughts and your own reflections, and please enjoy that time. Make the most of it. Be kind to yourself. We also said in the emails that we sent out that we're going to keep people's names for those who've written in, to have a candle lit in memory of their loved one in a book. And there will be a folder similar to this in each of our chapels on the Trust throughout the month of November. Clearly, with the lockdown, you're not going to be able to get in to look, but we think it's important for you to know that we've made this mark out, and in the month of November, your loved ones are being remembered. Normally at this stage, at our Remembrance service, I'd be saying to people, we're going to give you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee at the end, a biscuit, have a wee chat to people, meet somebody you've not seen for a while if you've been in the hospital at the same time, or, just chat and share notes and stories. Obviously, we can't do that, but my advice to you now, after doing this, if Remembrance service can be quite emotional, go make yourself a brew, get yourself a biscuit and relax and be kind to yourself. We'll end with our blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. The rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.